Obviously there were enemy aircraft coming at us. On the second sweep, I looked across and saw the same as David, that contacts were there. They couldn't see them, so they were dismissed.
That area of the South Atlantic was notorious for false radar signals. On a screen, birds or electronic atmospheric conditions could give the impression that they were enemy aircraft. 1 minute they were there, and the next gone. Throughout that day, there had been many false alarms. The tactics rehearsed and perfected by the Argentine pilots were equally deceptive. 150 miles from the target, they would drop to 50 feet above the waves. They were relying on the curvature of the Earth to shield them from enemy radar. At 20 miles out, they would fire their missiles and make their escape. For most of the low-level attack run, they'd be undetectable. But there were moments when they had to break cover and risk detection by the two types of radar carried by warships. One spots incoming aircraft, the other detects the radar that is trying to locate them. 60 miles from the combat zone, the aircraft had climbed to 2,000 feet and switched on their radars for 3 seconds to get a fix on the fleet.
Captain, have a radar contact, 2 contacts. All positions, this is the AWO, air raid warning, red.
Flash, new hostile at 10.
During those few seconds, the Super Etendard's radar pulses were detected by HMS Glasgow out on picket duty.
Keep trying, AWO. Roger.
At the same time, another picket, HMS Sheffield, got a radar trace of the 2 aircraft racing toward the fleet.
What's that?
Beda Karatz and Mayora were beginning their final approach. They popped up again, briefly exposing themselves to detection again, this time to find a target. Their radar picked up a large Echo and several smaller ones, which they took to be a carrier and her escorts. They'd locked on to the larger contact, but it wasn't a carrier, it was HMS Sheffield. At that moment, Sheffield was communicating with London via satellite on the same frequencies she'd normally use to detect radar signals coming in from hostile aircraft or missiles. Sheffield was now a target, but no one on board knew it.
45's alarm aircraft, fuse high.
45's alarm aircraft, fuse high.
Warnings from HMS Glasgow, which was aware of the danger, went unheeded.
Hostile at 1040 now at strength 2. Answer from Sheffield on Orcs, sir.
Roger, keep trying.
When I was absolutely sure
there was so loud that I didn't hear the order to fire. Just at that moment, I emerged from a rain cloud, and then I asked him if he had fired. He told me yes, and then I fired my Exocet.
There were 2 minutes to impact. It was only now that some on Sheffield realized the danger they were in.
And in front, there's
250, handbrake, 250. Etendard, Exocet, nothing to do with radar. Roger, AWO, thank you.
All positions, this is the APS.
Blind AWO, look out.
Radar operators on Glasgow watched as the Exocet's radars locked on to the Sheffield and made final adjustments to their trajectories.
Now 10 miles from the Sheffield, sir.
Hostile at 1040.
By now, high-tech electronics were irrelevant. On Sheffield, they could see what was coming.
On the bridge, the officer watch saw 2 trails of smoke. He then realized
Captain AWO, 3 miles from Sheffield. Hold position, stand by.
he had time to shout, "take cover," and then the impact occurred.
HMS Sheffield smoking in the distance. HMS Sheffield, buddy.
I was in my cabin at the time. I'd just come out of the operations room. There was a fair amount of movement, but the audible blast was not that great. But almost immediately, all the electrical hum stopped. Dead silence. And then, as I went forward, there were screams from down below. There was a lot of smoke coming out. And I knew something serious had happened.
The pilots assumed that the battle group and its vulnerable carriers would stay hundreds of miles east of the Falklands, beyond the reach of its bombers. So in order to extend their flying range, the naval pilots hurriedly perfected a technique the British thought beyond them: mid-air refueling. It was the 25th of May, Argentina's National Day. As a result, the task force, some 70 miles to the northeast of the Falklands, was on high alert. But what the British weren't expecting was an attack from their rear, which was unprotected by picket ships. To achieve the element of surprise, the two aircraft flew over 150 miles to the north of Rio Grande and refueled. This photograph was taken from a Hercules tanker on that afternoon. They then continued east before turning south to run in on the battle group. 35 miles from where they believed it to be, they climbed to 1,000 feet and activated their radars. They picked up echoes of two small ships and one much bigger one. The missile had locked onto HMS Hermes. Argentina was within minutes of destroying Britain's most important aircraft carrier and probably winning the war.
I must eyewitness. At the time the sun was setting, were very bright. And when I saw the missiles elegantly turned towards...
The Exocet may have been formidable, but it wasn't infallible. As it closed in on Hermes, its radar picked up another target, a massive container ship a few miles away. It was the Atlantic Conveyor, a converted aircraft ferry, under the joint command of her master, Captain Ian North, and a Royal Navy officer, Captain Mike Layard. For Exocet, bigger meant better. Veering away from the Hermes, it now headed for the Atlantic Conveyor.
On this occasion, the threat direction wasn't quite so clear, and we turned